Hello and welcome to Tête à Tête, France 24's flagship interview show. Our guest this week is Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. He is the chairman of Pakistan's People's Party, which is part of the governing coalition. He previously served as Pakistan's foreign minister between 2022 and 2023, and he joins us from Karachi. Thank you very much for being our guest.
Thank you.
1 year ago, a 5-day war opposed Pakistan to India, with India bombing alleged militant camps in Pakistan 2 weeks after a terrorist attack on its soil. After exchanging missiles and aerial strikes, a ceasefire was announced by the US President Donald Trump. A year later, the tension remains high between both countries. Is war still a possibility between Pakistan and India 1 year later?
You're absolutely right. About a year ago, Pakistan and India, two nuclear powers, we had a 5-day war, which was ultimately brokered in the form of a ceasefire. Pakistan emerged out of that conflict with an upper hand, both militarily, diplomatically, in the context that they lost 7 of their planes, and the United States had formed a ceasefire between our two countries, at least negotiated a ceasefire between our two countries. And that ceasefire was meant to be the beginning of a process. The Indian side had committed at the time, and the United States Secretary of State, as part of his announcement of the ceasefire, had even mentioned that we were to meet at another location to discuss all friction points. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. India continues to collectively punish the people of Pakistan by violating the Indus Water Treaty, which had catastrophic consequences for us during the last floods, where we weren't shared the appropriate data that we were entitled to under that treaty. And now we're bracing ourselves for the dry season, where once again, India is weaponizing water, and there's a threat that they'll hold back Pakistan's water. And as you know, any country whose lifeline is challenged, whose water supply is challenged, obviously would consider that an act of war. So there are underlying tensions that can, at any point, lead to yet another conflict. This is why it has been Pakistan's consistent position that both countries should engage in a dialogue in pursuit of peace through diplomacy. India has rebuffed that offer from us, the United States, and many other countries over the last 1 year. I hope with the new crisis in the Strait of Hormuz, the economic consequences of that will push India to reconsider its position. We can't afford to have two nuclear-armed neighbors that have no communication channels open. And we can't risk putting the entire international community through what you went through during that 5-day conflict when two nuclear powers went to war.
India is accusing Pakistan of hosting and supporting terrorist groups that are targeting India. Pakistan has always denied this, but it is an issue. Do you think that Pakistan also has to look into the issue and address it as India is demanding?
Not because India is demanding, but Pakistan sees terrorism as a threat. We have, in sheer number of lives lost, Pakistan has lost the most number of its citizens to terrorism. We do take this issue seriously. We've been consistently challenging this threat. The international community has recognized Pakistan's efforts in combating extremism and terrorism. When I was foreign minister, Pakistan was removed from the FATF grey list, which is in and around the same time as this conflict. Again, as a result of the quantitative action that Pakistan has taken against terrorists on the ground. In this context, where there was an indigenous terrorist attack in Indian-occupied Kashmir, India has become the child who cried wolf, and not outlandishly blames Pakistan without a shred of evidence. It's been more than a year since the conflict. They still haven't been able to provide any proof. It's been a year since the conflict, where the Prime Minister of Pakistan stood up and said, when these allegations were first levied against Pakistan, that he is ready for an impartial international investigation into these accusations. But India hasn't even taken up that offer. At the end of the day, terrorism is not only an issue for Pakistan, this is an issue for India as well. Pakistan and India have no lines of communication, no means of coordinating. You can't counter terrorism without cross-border cooperation. The last conversation that India and Pakistan had vis-a-vis terrorism was back in 2012. So I'd once again, if India's real concern is to address terrorism, I'd once again encourage them to engage in a dialogue with Pakistan that encompasses all of our friction points, including terrorism, and let's work together to combat this menace.
I want to speak about Afghanistan. Pakistan has been striking inside the country, even the capital of Kabul, killing scores of civilians. We remember a strike on a hospital on March 16. Pakistan is claiming that Afghanistan is harboring terrorist groups, but also accuses India of conducting a proxy war against Pakistan. Is this also your opinion, that this is not only about Afghanistan and Pakistan, but also that India is directly involved in this?
Unfortunately, there is, without a doubt, Indian connections. Now, just for a little bit of context, Pakistan is not aiming to target hospitals or any civilian infrastructure. Of course, the situation in Afghanistan is for the world to see. Just because NATO and the United States up and left in the manner in which they did, it doesn't mean that the problems that they left behind in Afghanistan have gone away. In fact, those problems festered and have had severe consequences for the people of Afghanistan, first and foremost, but also for the people of my country. I was talking about Pakistan's fight against terrorism in my answer to the last question. And in that context, Pakistan had managed to combat the terrorist groups within Pakistan to the extent, before the fall of Kabul, that they'd lost the capacity and the ability to strike in Pakistan. Ever since the fall of Kabul, we've had an exponential increase in the number of terrorist attacks within Pakistan, taking our numbers back to the highest they ever were. The number of terrorist attacks within Pakistan were now back to the days of the war on terror. Unfortunately, most of the terrorist attacks that do take place in Pakistan are linked to organizations within Afghanistan. Some of those organizations have a history of cooperating with the interim government within Afghanistan. And while I was foreign minister, we consistently engaged with Afghanistan. The following government also consistently engaged with them. After seeing a lack of will and ability and desire to combat these groups, Pakistan was forced to launch our actions against not the Afghan people, but those specific groups that continue, not in an isolated event. These are thousands of terrorist attacks that have taken place all across my country. And as a result of that, we've taken the fight to these terrorists. As far as the Indian element is concerned, unfortunately, they continue to fund organizations that are behind terrorist activities within Pakistan. We actually caught high-ranking Indian officer, an intelligence officer within Balochistan, Kulbhushan Yadav, who was supporting such terrorist groups within Pakistan. So this is not a news story that India is also by proxy involved in this issue. But it is not in the interest of Pakistan, it is not in the interest of India, and it is not in the interest of the international community that any group support non-state actors. And I'm sure that history should have taught us by now that what is the yesterday's Mujahideen eventually becomes Al-Qaeda and bites the hand that once fed them. And this is the advice that I would give to my Indian friends who continue to support violent groups. who conduct terrorist activities within Pakistan, that this is not in the interest of regional peace and stability. And we should work together to combat groups of concern to Pakistan and groups of concern to India. And that's only possible if we engage in dialogue and diplomacy.
Last question quickly. Pakistan has played a significant diplomatic role in trying to broker an agreement between the United States and Iran. We've seen the army chief especially being hailed by Donald Trump as his preferred general. What do you make of Pakistan's diplomatic role? Do you think it's a good thing, it's a good signal, or is it's a bit dangerous because if this fails, this could be coming back to haunt you?
I mean, if it fails and what will come to haunt us is very much a separate question. The issue of concern was the world was on the brink of a much wider conflict that some had begun to describe as World War III. And I must appreciate the Pakistani leadership, the Pakistani president, prime minister, our field marshal, for their efforts in pursuing diplomacy, working with other stakeholders in the international community to create the necessary diplomatic space that ultimately resulted in a ceasefire. That ceasefire was extended, and while there's still issues of concern today, I don't believe anybody within the Pakistani leadership has any doubt that this is the only way. Forward. There's no military solution to the Strait of Hormuz crisis. There's no military solution to any of the United States or Iran's concerns. And ultimately, we need to build on the momentum of this ceasefire for a more permanent solution, a more permanent peace. The consequences of this ceasefire not manifesting or us returning to conflict is not just consequences or negative consequences for Pakistan. That is consequences for the entire international community. We're already seeing how, obviously, first and foremost, in the actual conflict and the sheer number of lives lost in the humanitarian scale of any such conflict is very upsetting. But in addition to that, the economic cost of this conflict is not just borne by the warring parties. The economic cost of this conflict is being paid by the people across the world, by the people in South Asia, by the people in the Middle East, in Europe, in America, even in the Far East, in the form of inflation, in the form of the bills at the petrol pump, the bills at the grocery store. And it is really this economic cost of this conflict will continue to fester for some time. So I reiterate on your program and call on the government of the United States and the government of Iran to cement this ceasefire in a more permanent peace, which the entire international community, not just Pakistan, would benefit from.
Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, I want to thank you very much for being our guest here on France 24. Thank you very much for watching this program. Stay tuned for more news.
Thank you.